So, do you know why the chemistry teacher had a hard time writing jokes about the periodic table? He wasn't in his element. Let's learn about this thing. So, the very first periodic table was made by this dude right here, Mr. Rasa Mendeleev. He was a Russian chemist, lived in Siberia back in the late 1800s. And the idea came to him kind of in a dream. He was supposed to catch a train going to St. Petersburg. And back then, the taxis in Siberia, Russia, was a sleigh. And he made that sleigh driver wait for 2 days to come up with what is known as our periodic table, which at the time looked like this. Because at the time, they only knew about so many elements, actually about 14 or so, because the others hadn't been discovered. But he put it together much like index cards, and he left spaces because he knew he had the idea that there's things missing here. So Mendeleev, you need to know Mr. Mendeleev. You wouldn't want to meet him down a dark alley. He was a Russian chemist, and he was the first one to come up with the idea of the periodic table. Okay, so those things are important. But you also need to know, well, how did he organize this? So at the time, they didn't know a whole lot. This is in the late 1800s. They didn't know about protons, neutrons. They didn't have any of that. So actually, what he said, he organized it by what he was able to recognize by the elements that they knew. He did it by their similar characteristics. Okay, and properties. Such as, E in there. This looks like a metal. It's shiny. These have similar things in common too. And so that's how he organized his periodic table. It was done by similar characteristics and properties. Okay? No, Mr. Rasa Mendeleev. So now we'll talk about Mr. Moseley. And so Mr. Moseley, he did his work about 44 years after Mr. Mendeleev had discovered, Mr. Mendeleev had done his periodic table, but remember, he only knew about so many elements. So about 44 years after that, Mr. Moseley knew that they had already discovered many more elements, and they had already started learning about the atom even further, because Mr. Rutherford had done his gold foil experiment and learned that the protons were actually in the nucleus. And so Mr. Moseley, what he said was, well, let's relook at the periodic table and maybe we arrange the elements by their atomic number. And when he did that, folks, we have the modern periodic table. So we could say that Mr. Moseley is actually the father of the modern periodic table, okay? He is credited with the periodic table as we know it today, as you look at it in the classroom, arranged by the atomic number. Okay, so we're going to break apart the periodic table now into a bunch of different parts because you need to know all the names. You probably heard of me mentioning these several times to you in class, but we're going to kind of apply it here. So we're going to start first with our periods, okay? Periods are actually what goes horizontally across. And so there is period number 1, period number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Remember, we use these as our energy levels. We use these in electron configuration, but periods are horizontal across the periodic table. So then the next thing we have are groups and families. And groups and families actually run up and down, okay? They run vertically up and down are called our groups and families. And so they have different names. I'm gonna erase my arrow here. So the first family over here on the left, that is called the alkali metals, and that runs the whole up and down. The next one we have is called are alkali earth metals, and that actually runs both up and down here. There we go. All right, our next one, we jump across the big divide. I'm going to grab my boron group. So the boron group, actually, it starts with the element boron right here, right? So we're kind of naming them after the first element at the very top of the group or family. But yes, they then also have go up and down that whole family. Okay, our next one is called the carbon group. And our carbon group is right next to the boron group, okay? We actually have carbon as the first element, but then once again, that also includes all the elements up and down. So our next group right next to the carbon group is our nitrogen group. And yes, what element is the very first one in the nitrogen group? That would be your nitrogen, your N. But then, yes, that also runs up and down the whole family and group. Our next one is our chalcogen group, and that is actually, that group is, the first element is oxygen in there, but it has a fancy name. We call it the chalcogen group, and it goes up and down there. And then finally, next to our noble gases that we'll get to is our halogen group. You may have heard Mr. Armstrong talk about that. That is right here. That's for your fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine. Fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine, okay? And that goes up and down that whole family right there. Fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine. And then finally, yes, we all know them, the noble gases. They're noble. They don't need anybody else. Our noble gases are our very end, okay? So let's talk about a few other things. So the other thing we have here, notice my black zigzag line. That is our stair-step line. And what that separates is your metals, okay, from your non-metals. And these, everything to the right of the staircase are non-metals, okay? They are considered to be non-metals. Right on the staircase, if it is touching the staircase, so what elements would that be? Well, that would be your boron, right here, 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 okay? All of those are considered to be our metalloids, okay? Those are called metalloids if they touch the staircase, all right? So you need to know all of those. And so then you might hear the term, okay, called representative elements. Your representative elements, and I'll put those on here for us. All right, so now let's talk about our representative elements and what parts of the periodic table that is. So it is actually going to be our S block, if you remember that, and our P block. Or right here, those are your S representative, and then right here, those are your representative, your taller, if you will, the tallest ones, right? And so these other are your inner transition metals. Okay? Your inner transition metals, that would be these right in here, okay? So you need to know your parts of the periodic table, okay? So make sure you're copying these on to your periodic table that I will provide to you.